The medical ship called Serene Dawn was flying through the empty space near the neutral zone when they heard the distress signal. Chief Medical Officer Eth was a tall alien with blue see-through skin and 4 thin arms. She told the captain to change course and find the signal right away. What they found made everyone on the bridge go silent. A small human transport ship was floating in pieces. The metal was torn apart like someone had ripped paper. Fire marks covered what was left of the hull. Broken glass and debris floated around it like a sad cloud. "I am checking for life signs," said Navigator Prill. Her long antennae moved back and forth as she worked the controls. Then she stopped. Her antennae stood straight up. "Captain, there is a survivor. One human male. He is alive." Eth made a sound of disbelief. Her species had 2 hearts and both of them skipped a beat. "That is not possible. Look at that wreckage. The impact force must have been over 200 gravitational units. Nothing survives that. Nothing." But the sensors did not lie. Someone was alive in that broken ship. Captain ordered a rescue team to go immediately. Eth went with them. She had to see this for herself. The shuttle crossed the dark space between the 2 ships and docked with what remained of the cargo bay. The rescue team cut through the twisted metal and stepped inside. Emergency lights flickered red and orange. Smoke still hung in the air. Everything was destroyed. Crates had smashed against walls. Control panels had exploded. The floor was covered in broken glass and bent metal. And there, sitting against a collapsed wall, was a human. He was a male, maybe 30 years old by human counting. He had short brown hair that was dirty and stuck together with dried blood. His left arm hung at a strange angle. His clothes were torn and burned in several places. A deep cut ran across his forehead, and bruises covered most of his visible skin. But he was awake, he was sitting up, and when he saw the rescue team, he smiled. "Hey there," the human said. His voice was rough and tired, but somehow calm. "Name's Danny, Danny Cole. You folks wouldn't happen to have any water, would you? I've been stuck here for a while and I'm really thirsty." Eth stood frozen in place. Her medical training had not prepared her for this. She had seen many injuries in her long career. She had treated soldiers and accident victims and disease patients, but she had never seen someone this badly hurt act so normal. The rescue team helped Danny stand up. Eth expected him to scream in pain or fall unconscious. Instead, he walked. He actually walked to the shuttle with only a little help, limping on his right leg and holding his left arm close to his chest. "Thanks for coming to get me," Danny said as they flew back to the Serene Dawn. "I was starting to think I'd be stuck there forever. The emergency beacon was damaged in the crash, so I wasn't sure if anyone would hear it." "How long were you in the wreckage?" Eth asked. "About 2 days, I think. Hard to tell without the ship's clock working. I found some emergency rations in a storage box that didn't get smashed, so that helped." 2 days. This human had survived 2 days in a destroyed ship with injuries that should have killed him instantly. Eth's mind could not process this information. When they reached the medical bay of the Serene Dawn, Eth ordered a complete body scan. Danny sat on the examination table and looked around the room with interest, like he was a tourist visiting a new city instead of a patient with serious injuries. "Nice setup you have here," he said. "Very clean, I like the lighting." Eth did not respond. She was too focused on the scan results appearing on her screen. As the numbers filled in, her blue skin turned pale. "Torais," she called to her young assistant, "come here, tell me I am reading this wrong." Torais hurried over and looked at the screen. His 4 arms started to shake. "Chief Medical Officer, this cannot be correct. The scanner must be broken." "Run it again." Torais ran the scan again. The results were the same. He ran it a 3rd time, nothing changed. Danny Cole had 17 broken bones. His left arm was broken in 3 different places. 4 of his ribs had cracked. His right ankle was shattered into several pieces. His collarbone had snapped completely in half. Small fractures covered his pelvis and shoulder blade like a spider's web. 17 breaks, in a body that should not even be breathing. Eth walked slowly toward her patient. Her hands were shaking as she held her. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "do you understand how badly you are hurt?" Danny looked down at his body. He moved his arm a little and made a small face of discomfort. Then he shrugged with his good shoulder. "Oh, that. Yeah, I figured I was pretty banged up. The landing was rough. Is anything serious?" "Serious?" Eth's voice came out higher than she intended. "You have 17 broken bones." Danny thought about this for a moment. 17? Huh, I thought it might be more, to be honest. When I hit that mountain, I felt a bunch of things snap. 17 doesn't seem too bad. Behind Eth, there was a soft thump. She turned around to see Torres lying on the floor. He had fainted. "Is he okay?" Danny asked, actually sounding concerned. Eth ignored the question. She could not stop staring at this human, this impossible creature who was discussing 17 broken bones like they were minor inconveniences. Her entire understanding of biology was falling apart in front of her eyes. "Mr. Cole, I need you to understand something. The injuries you have would kill any member of my species instantly. Even the strongest species in the known galaxy would die from this level of trauma. You should not be alive. You certainly should not be talking to me and asking about my unconscious assistant." Danny scratched his head with his good hand. "I mean, it hurts pretty bad, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I'm dying or anything. Bones heal, they always do. Just need some time and maybe a cast or two." "Bones heal," Eth repeated quietly. Such a simple statement, such an impossible concept. She had studied human biology in her training, but only briefly. Humans were a minor species who had only discovered space travel 30 years ago. They were considered fragile and unimportant by most of the galaxy. No one paid much attention to them. Now Eth wondered if everyone had made a terrible mistake. She helped Torres wake up and sent him to get the captain. Then she started treating Danny's injuries, setting his bones and applying healing casts. Throughout the entire procedure, which would have caused most species to pass out from pain, Danny Cole kept talking. He told her about his job as a salvage worker. He told her about his home planet called Earth. He told her about his mother, who always said he was too stubborn for his own good. He even made jokes about his situation, laughing at things that Eth could not understand. When Captain arrived an hour later, Danny was eating a meal from the medical bay's food supplies and complaining that the temperature on the ship was a bit chilly. 17 broken bones, and he wanted a warmer blanket. Eth looked at Captain with fear in her eyes. "Captain," she said quietly, "I think we need to learn more about humans." News traveled fast on the Serene Dawn. By the next morning, every single crew member had heard about the human in the medical bay. They whispered about him in the corridors. They gathered in small groups to discuss what they had learned. Some refused to believe it. Others were scared. A few were curious. The human with 17 broken bones had asked for water and complained about the cold. This was all anyone could talk about. Captain was 300 years old. In his long life, he had traveled to distant stars and met dozens of different alien species. He had seen things that most beings could only dream about, but he had never encountered anything quite like Danny Cole. He decided to visit the human himself. Danny was sitting up in his medical bed when the captain arrived. His left arm was wrapped in a white healing cast that glowed softly with medical technology. Bandages covered various cuts on his face and body. He was eating something from a small silver packet, something he had saved from his destroyed ship. "Captain," Eth said, standing nearby. "This is Danny Cole. Danny, this is our captain." "Nice to meet you, sir," Danny said. He tried to stand up, but Eth quickly pushed him back down. "Sorry, I'd shake your hand, but the working one is busy with this food packet." sat down in a chair across from the human. The captain had silver scales that showed his old age. His four eyes studied Danny carefully, looking for some explanation for the impossible thing sitting in front of him. "You are a remarkable specimen, Mr. Cole," said. "Just Danny, please, and thanks, I guess. Though my mom would probably disagree with the remarkable part. She always said I was too stubborn for my own good." There was that word again. Stubborn. Eth had mentioned that Danny used it several times, made a note to research what it meant for humans. "May I ask you something, Danny?" "Sure, shoot." Paused. The translator in his ear did not quite understand the phrase, but he guessed it meant yes. "How are you alive?" Danny finished chewing and wiped his mouth with his good hand. He seemed to think about the question seriously for a moment. "Lucky, I guess. The navigation computer on my ship had a problem during atmospheric entry. I tried to pull up when I saw the mountains, but it was too late. Clipped a big peak, bounced off a glacier, and landed in a deep. The cold probably helped keep the swelling down while I waited for rescue." "You speak of this as though it were a minor problem." "Well, it wasn't great," Danny laughed, and several medical staff in the room jumped at the sudden sound. "But I've had worse." Leaned forward in his chair. His translator must have made an error. "Worse? You have experienced something worse than 17 broken bones." "I mean not all at once, no, but broken bones aren't that big a deal where I come from." Danny counted on his fingers as he spoke. "When I was 12 years old, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. At 17, I broke my leg playing football. That's a sport we have, lots of running and hitting each other. Cracked a few ribs in a car accident when I was 22. Broke my hand in a bar fight a couple years ago." He paused, still counting. "Oh, and I fractured my skull once, but that was just a small crack. The doctor said I was lucky it wasn't worse." "Lucky?" repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. "Yeah, could have been a lot worse." Captain did not know how to respond. He had seen soldiers die from single broken bones. The shock and pain alone could stop their hearts. Yet this human was listing his injuries like they were minor achievements, stories to tell at social gatherings. The door opened and Chief Medical Officer Eth entered. She was holding A in her four hands and her face was troubled. She looked at with an expression he had never seen before. Fear mixed with something else. Wonder, perhaps, or horror. "Captain, I need to speak with you, privately." Excused himself and followed Eth into a small room next to the medical bay. The door closed behind them, and Eth immediately began to pace back and forth. "I have been researching human biology," she said. "I accessed the Galactic database and found their species file. What I learned is very disturbing." "Tell me." Eth handed him her hands were shaking slightly. "Humans do not simply survive injuries, Captain. They heal from them. Their bones, when broken, actually grow back stronger than before. Their skin repairs itself. Their blood thickens to stop bleeding. Their immune systems actively hunt and destroy any infections." Scrolled through the information. Each new fact made his heart beat faster. Humans could survive losing arms and legs. They could function with only one of certain organs that other species needed two of. They regularly recovered from injuries that would kill most intelligent beings instantly. "There is more," Eth continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They have a chemical in their bodies called adrenaline. When they are in danger, this chemical floods their system. It allows them to ignore pain completely. It gives them strength beyond their normal limits. Their historical records show mothers lifting heavy vehicles to save their children, soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that should have made them unable to move." "This cannot be real," said, though the evidence was right in front of him. "It is real, Captain. They call it shock or survival instinct, but it is more than that. It is as if their entire biology is designed for one purpose: to survive, to endure, to refuse to die no matter what happens to them." Set down his mind was racing with thoughts and questions. For 30 years, the galaxy had ignored humanity. They were a young species with primitive technology. They posed no threat. They offered no value. Everyone had agreed to simply let them develop on their own, like children who would eventually grow up. But what if they had been wrong? What if humanity was not weak at all? "There is one more thing," Eth said. "I found records of something humans call pain tolerance. It is the ability to experience pain without letting it stop you from acting. Among all known species in the galactic database, humans have the highest recorded pain tolerance, by a significant margin." "How significant?" "They can endure approximately 10 times more pain than the average species before becoming unable to function. And even then, many of them continue to push forward. They have a saying on their world: 'What does not kill you makes you stronger.'" Was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, he could see Danny Cole in the medical bay. The human was now chatting with a young nurse, making her laugh with some story or joke. He had 17 broken bones, and he was making people laugh. "What do we do with this information?" asked. "I do not know, Captain, but I think we need to be very careful with this human. Not because he is dangerous to us, but because he represents something we have never encountered before, a species that does not know how to give up." Nodded slowly. He watched Danny wave goodbye to the nurse with his good hand, still smiling despite everything that had happened to him. "Inform the crew," said finally. "Full medical care for our guest, treat him with respect, and keep researching. I want to know everything about humans, everything." Because Captain had a feeling, deep in both of his hearts, that the galaxy had made a very big mistake in ignoring humanity. And Danny Cole, sitting in that medical bay with 17 broken bones and a smile on his face, was the proof. Danny Cole had been on the Serene Dawn for 3 days when everything changed. He was sitting in the medical bay, playing a simple game on a borrowed when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. The calm voice of the ship's computer announced an emergency. All crew were to report to their stations immediately. Danny set down and listened. He could hear people running in the corridor outside. Voices were shouting in the language, too fast for his translator to keep up. Something very bad was happening. Eth rushed into the medical bay a few minutes later. Her blue skin had turned pale and her 4 arms were shaking. "We received a distress call," she said, speaking quickly. "A colony ship called the Gentle Horizon. They were hit by meteors while passing through an asteroid field. Over 2,000 civilians are trapped on board, including hundreds of children." Danny sat up. "How bad is the damage?" "Very bad. The hull has been broken in multiple places. Their life support is failing. They will run out of air in 6 hours. 6 hours? How long until a rescue ship can reach them?" Eth's voice dropped. 18 hours. The nearest proper rescue vessel is too far away. They will not make it in time." The words hung in the air between them. 2,000 civilians, hundreds of children, and no one could save them. Danny was already getting out of his bed. His left arm was still in a cast, and his ribs screamed in pain when he moved. His right ankle was wrapped in bandages and hurt with every step, but he stood up anyway. "I want to help," he said. Eth stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You have 17 broken bones." 16 now, actually. You said my collarbone is almost healed." Danny found his boots and started putting them on with his good hand. "Look, I know I'm not in the best shape, but I have 2 hands, well, 1.5, and I know how to work in damaged ships. I used to do salvage work back home. Let me help." "Danny, this is not possible. You are injured. You need rest. You need healing. You cannot go on a dangerous rescue mission in your condition." Danny stopped and looked at her. His eyes were serious now, more serious than she had ever seen them. There are children on that ship, kids who are scared and running out of air. I can't just sit here and do nothing while they die." Wanted to argue. Every part of her medical training told her to refuse, But there was something in Danny's face that made her hesitate, a determination that went beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond anything she understood about how living creatures were supposed to think. She led him to the command center. Captain was there, surrounded by his senior officers. They were looking at a holographic display of the damaged colony ship. Large sections were marked in red, indicating areas exposed to space. The surviving had crowded into the remaining safe sections, but those areas were getting smaller as systems failed. "Captain," Danny said, limping forward, "I want to volunteer for the rescue team." Every in the room turned to stare at him. His 4 eyes blinked in surprise. "Mr. Cole, you are seriously injured." "I know, but you need every person you can get, right? Your ship is a medical frigate, not a rescue vessel. You don't have enough crew for a full evacuation. Let me help." Looked at Eth, who shrugged helplessly with all 4 arms. The captain thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, you will accompany the second rescue team." The journey to the gentle horizon took 2 hours. Danny spent most of that time asking questions. He wanted to know about physiology. What could they breathe? How long could they survive without air? What temperatures could they handle? The rescue team leader, an engineer named, answered each question patiently. When they finally reached the colony ship and docked, Danny saw that the damage was worse than anyone had described. Entire sections of the ship had been torn away. He could see stars through the gaps in the hull. Emergency lights flickered everywhere, and the sound of warning alarms filled the air. Danny's team was assigned to Sector 7. Approximately 300 civilians had taken shelter in a large cargo hold there. The problem was that the only way to reach them was through a corridor that had lost all its air and gravity. "We will need to wear emergency pressure suits," announced. "The crossing will take about 15 minutes. Danny looked at the suits hanging on the wall. They were designed for bodies, with 4 armholes and a shape that would never fit a human. He tried one on anyway. It was useless. The arms were in the wrong places, and the helmet did not seal properly around his head. "These suits won't work for me," Danny said. His antennae drooped in sadness. "I am sorry, Danny Cole, you cannot come with us. There is no way for you to cross the corridor safely." Danny looked through the window at the dark corridor beyond. No air, no gravity, nothing but empty space and floating debris. A human being could not survive out there. Everyone knew that. Everyone except Danny. "How long can I survive in hard vacuum?" he asked. Blinked all 4 of his eyes. "What do you mean?" "Without a suit, no air, no pressure, how long before I die?" "Danny Cole, you cannot be serious about this. Just answer the question." Consulted his with trembling hands. "Human records indicate that your species can remain conscious in vacuum for approximately 15 seconds. You would have perhaps 90 seconds before permanent damage occurs. Death would follow shortly after." "And how long does it take to cross that corridor at full speed?" Another check of the. At maximum movement speed, the crossing could be completed in approximately 70 seconds. But Danny Cole, the cold, the lack of pressure, the radiation exposure, your injuries. 70 seconds, Danny repeated. He was already taking off his jacket. "I can hold my breath for 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if I really push it." "This is madness." "Maybe." Danny grabbed a safety rope and clipped it to his belt. "But there are kids in that cargo hold, and I can get there faster without a suit slowing me down." He walked to the airlock door. His body hurt everywhere. His broken bones sent waves of pain through him with every step. His lungs still ached from the crash 3 days ago. Every sensible part of his brain was screaming at him to stop, to turn around, to find another way. But there were children on the other side of that corridor, scared children running out of air. Danny took several deep breaths, forcing as much oxygen into his blood as possible. He could feel his heart beating fast in his chest. Fear tried to grip him, but he pushed it away. There was no time for fear. "Open the airlock," he said. Stood frozen, unable to move. This went against every rule and protocol he had ever learned. He was watching a being prepare to commit suicide. "Please, those kids don't have time for us to argue about this. Open the airlock." The engineer looked at Danny for a long moment. He saw something in the human's eyes that he had never seen in any species before. Not courage, exactly. Something deeper. Something that said, "I would rather die trying than live knowing I did nothing." With shaking hands, activated the airlock controls. The door began to open. Danny Cole took one final breath, filling his lungs completely. And then he stepped into the void. The cold hit Danny like a hammer made of ice. It was not the slow chill of a winter morning. It was not the gradual cooling of a room without heat. This was instant, complete, and absolutely terrifying. Every drop of moisture on his skin began to freeze. The water in his eyes started to turn to ice crystals. His body temperature began dropping faster than he thought possible. But Danny did not stop. He could not stop. He pushed off from the airlock frame with his good arm, launching himself into the dark corridor. Zero gravity was strange and disorienting. There was no up or down, no left or right, only the distant airlock at the other end, a small square of light that seemed impossibly far away. 30 seconds passed. Danny's lungs began to burn. The oxygen in his blood was running out faster than he had expected. The cold was making his muscles slow and stiff. Every movement took more effort than the last. His broken ribs sent spikes of pain through his chest each time he pushed off from floating debris. 45 seconds. His vision started to blur around the edges. Tunnel vision he remembered from his training. It happened when the brain did not get enough oxygen. First, the edges of your sight went dark. Then everything started to narrow down to a single point. After that came unconsciousness. After that came death. Danny kept moving. 60 seconds. He could see the airlock clearly now. It was close, maybe 20 feet away, maybe less, but his arms and legs were not working properly anymore. The cold had frozen his muscles. His good hand could barely grip the pieces of debris he was using to push himself forward. 65 seconds. His cast-covered arm hit a piece of broken metal. The impact sent a wave of agony through his entire body. He felt something shift inside the cast, one of his broken bones moving out of place. The pain was incredible, but he used it. Let it fuel him. Let it remind him that he was still alive. 70 seconds. Danny's hand touched the airlock door. His fingers were numb and clumsy, barely able to feel anything. He fumbled for the emergency release panel. Where was it? Where was the button? His vision was almost completely dark now, just a tiny circle of light remaining in the center. There, his frozen fingers found the release lever. He pulled. For one horrible moment, nothing happened. Danny thought he had failed, thought he would die here in the darkness, just inches away from safety. His mother would never know what happened to him. His body would float in this corridor forever. Then the airlock opened. Air rushed out to meet him, warm and wonderful. Gravity returned as he tumbled into the pressurized chamber. Danny lay on the floor, gasping and shaking, watching frost disappear from his skin in tiny wisps of steam. Every part of his body hurt in ways he could not describe. But he was alive. He was alive. Human. A small voice, trembling with fear. Danny looked up and saw a young standing in the inner doorway. She was tiny, maybe half his size, with translucent skin that had faded to an unhealthy gray. Her 4 small arms were wrapped tightly around herself for warmth. "Hey there," Danny managed to say. His voice sounded strange, rough, and broken. "I'm Danny. I'm here to help." "You came through the dead space," the child whispered. "Without a skin, without protection, how?" Danny slowly pushed himself to his feet. His body felt like it had been run over by a truck, then frozen, then run over again. but he could stand. He could walk, and that was all that mattered. "I'm human," he said, as if that explained everything. "Now let's go get you and your family out of here." The cargo hold was crowded with over 300. They were packed together in the dim emergency lighting, all of them weak and tired from the thinning air. Many of the adults were barely conscious. The children looked scared and confused. When Danny walked in, they all stared at him with wide eyes. Danny did not waste time on explanations. He started organizing the evacuation immediately. His salvage experience took over, and he found himself giving orders like he had done this 100 times before. "Children first," he announced. "Then the elderly and sick, then everyone else. We're going to form a line and move people through in groups." And the suited rescue team had finally caught up. They helped set up a relay system, passing evacuees through the airlock one by one. Danny stayed in the cargo hold, keeping people calm and organized. But there was a problem. The pressure suits were designed for adults. The children were too small to fit in them. They could not cross the dangerous corridor safely. Danny looked at the scared faces of the youngest. There were 7 children who were too small for the suits. 7 kids who would be left behind when everyone else was evacuated. Unless someone carried them. Danny did not hesitate. He grabbed the first child, a small female with pale blue skin, and held her tight against his chest. "Hold your breath when I tell you," he said, "and close your eyes. Don't open them until I say it's okay." He made the crossing again. 70 seconds of freezing darkness carrying a child in his arms. His broken bones screamed at him. His muscles burned. His lungs felt like they were filled with fire, but he kept moving. He reached the other side and handed the child to a waiting crew member. Then he turned around and went back. The second crossing was harder. His body was already damaged from the first one, but there were 6 more children waiting. Danny pushed himself forward anyway. The third crossing nearly killed him. His vision went completely dark halfway through, and he navigated the rest of the way by feel alone. When he reached the airlock, he collapsed on the floor and could not move for almost a minute. But there were still more children. 4th crossing, 5th crossing. Each one was worse than the last. Danny lost track of time, lost track of pain, lost track of everything except the next child he needed to save. On the 6th crossing, he felt something crack in his chest. Another rib probably, maybe 2, it did not matter. He kept moving. On the 7th and final crossing, Danny was carrying a tiny boy who could not have been more than 3 years old. The child was unconscious from lack of oxygen, limp in Danny's arms. Danny used his last remaining strength to push through the corridor, his body running on nothing but pure determination. When he reached the other side, he handed the boy to Eve, who was waiting with tears in her eyes. Then Danny Cole collapsed. His body simply stopped working. It had been pushed too far, stressed too much, damaged beyond what even a human could handle. He lay on the floor of the ship, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Eve ran to his side immediately. She pulled out her scanner and checked his injuries. What she saw made her want to cry. 4 new fractures. His original 17 broken bones had become 21. His body temperature was dangerously low. His blood oxygen levels were critical. His heart was beating in an irregular pattern that suggested serious damage. By every medical standard she knew, Danny Cole should be dead. But his heart was still beating. His lungs were still breathing. Against all logic, against all reason, against everything the universe said was possible, he was still alive. "You impossible creature," Eve whispered, her 4 hands working frantically to stabilize him. "What are you made of?" Danny's eyes opened just a little. His voice was barely a whisper, so quiet that Eve had to lean close to hear. "Did everyone make it?" Tears fell from Eve's eyes, landing on Danny's chest. "Yes," she said, "everyone made it, all 300, all 7 children, because of you." Danny smiled weakly. Then his eyes closed and he finally allowed himself to rest. Around him, the crew stared in silent amazement. They had just witnessed something that would change how they thought about humans forever. One man, 21 broken bones, 7 crossings through hard vacuum. And his first question was whether everyone else was safe. 6 months had passed since the rescue of the Gentle Horizon. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from over 300 different worlds had gathered for a special session. The room was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Holographic displays floated in the air, ready to show images and data. Translators hummed quietly, converting every word into hundreds of different languages. Ambassador of the Confederation stepped up to the speaking platform. She was tall and dignified, her blue skin marked with the patterns of high rank. Her 4 hands were clasped behind her back as she faced the assembled representatives. "Distinguished members of the Council," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I come before you today to share a story about a species that many of you have ignored for years, a species that you have called primitive, fragile, and unimportant. I speak of humanity." Quiet murmurs rippled through the chamber. Humanity was a minor species. Everyone knew that. Why was the ambassador wasting the Council's time with this? 6 months ago, continued, a human named Danny Cole was rescued from a crashed transport ship by one of our medical vessels. He had suffered 17 broken bones in the crash, 17 breaks that would have killed any member of any species in this room instantly. She paused, letting the number sink in. He survived, but that is not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is that he walked to our rescue shuttle under his own power. When our medical officer asked about his injuries, he said, and I quote, "Oh, that. Yeah, I figured I was pretty banged up." A holographic image appeared behind her, showing the results from Danny's first examination on the Serene Dawn. The representative stared at the data in disbelief. 17 fractures, clearly marked on a human skeleton diagram, and a note at the bottom, patient conscious and responsive. 3 days later, this same human participated in a rescue mission to save 2,000 civilians from a damaged colony ship. He still had those 17 broken bones. He crossed an exposed corridor without any protection, surviving hard vacuum for over 70 seconds through nothing but determination. Another image appeared, Danny Cole carrying a small child through the dark corridor. He made that crossing 7 times. He personally carried 7 of our children to safety. When it was over, he had 21 broken bones, and his first words when he woke up were, "Did everyone make it?" The chamber was completely silent now. Every representative was leaning forward, staring at the images with wide eyes. "Distinguished members, I did not come here just to tell you a remarkable story. I came here to give you a warning." His voice grew harder, more serious. "We have spent decades treating humanity as a minor species. We have watched them struggle to establish themselves in our galaxy. We have done nothing to help them, believing they were too weak to matter. We ignored them because we thought they posed no threat and offered no value." She stepped forward, her 4 hands now at her sides. "We were wrong. Humanity is not weak. They are not fragile. They are perhaps the most terrifying species this galaxy has ever seen. Not because they have the best weapons, not because they have the most advanced technology, but because they simply do not stop." The holographic display changed again, showing images from human history. Wars that lasted for years, diseases that were conquered through endless effort, harsh environments that were made livable through pure stubbornness. Humans climbing mountains that should have killed them, swimming across oceans that should have drowned them, surviving disasters that should have ended their civilization. They break and they heal stronger. They fall and they get back up. They face the impossible and they say, "Oh, that." Turn to face the full assembly. Danny Cole is not special among his kind. He is not a genetic miracle or a one-in-a-million case. He is simply human. And if one human with 21 broken bones can save 2,000 lives through willpower alone, imagine what humanity could do when they are healthy, when they are prepared, when they are motivated. She took a deep breath before delivering her final message. We should not fear humanity. We should befriend them. Because if they ever decide that we are worth protecting, no force in this galaxy will be able to stop them. And if they ever decide that we are their enemies. She let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished. The representatives looked at each other with new understanding in their eyes. For 30 years, they had ignored the small species from the unremarkable planet called Earth. Perhaps that had been a mistake. Later that same day, on that unremarkable planet, Danny Cole was sitting on the porch of his parents' home in rural Montana. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mountains rose in the distance, covered in pine trees and patches of snow. Danny's arm had finally healed completely, though Eth had warned him it might ache during cold weather. His ribs still hurt sometimes when he laughed too hard. His ankle would probably never be quite the same. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. His mother came out of the house carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, the same eyes Danny had inherited. She handed him a cup and sat down in the chair next to his. "I still can't believe you did that," she said, shaking her head. "Crossing through open space without a suit, carrying those alien children. What were you thinking?" Danny sipped his coffee and looked up at the stars. They were just starting to appear as the sky grew darker. Somewhere out there, they were telling his story to representatives from hundreds of worlds. Somewhere out there, species he had never heard of were learning about the human who refused to give up. "I don't know, Mom. I just kept thinking about how scared those kids must have been, trapped in the dark, running out of air, waiting for someone to save them." He shrugged, that same casual gesture that had confused so many aliens. "I figured somebody had to do something. Might as well be me." His mother shook her head again, but she was smiling. "You always were too stubborn for your own good." "Yeah," Danny agreed with a small laugh, "but it worked out okay in the end." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply across the darkening sky. A cool breeze blew down from the mountains, carrying the smell of pine trees and wild flowers. "Those aliens," his mother said after a while, they really came all the way to Earth just to check on you." Danny nodded. Eth had visited him 3 times since he returned home. Each time, she brought gifts and asked endless questions about human biology. She seemed fascinated by everything about his species, from their ability to heal to their strange customs and behaviors. "She keeps saying I'm remarkable," Danny said. "I keep telling her I'm just stubborn." Same thing, isn't it? Danny thought about that for a moment. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe stubbornness and were just different words for the same thing. The refusal to give up, even when giving up made sense. The determination to keep going, even when the body wanted to stop. High above them, the stars continued their eternal journey across the sky. Countless worlds, countless species, all of them now a little more aware of what humanity was capable of. And somewhere in the offices of the Galactic Council, a new file was being created. Its title was simple: Humanity Threat Assessment Revised. The previous classification had been minimal. The new classification was Unknown, Recommend Caution. It was, the Council agreed, the only appropriate response to a species that could look at 17 broken bones and say, "Oh, that." Danny finished his coffee and stood up slowly, stretching muscles that still ached from his adventure 6 months ago. Tomorrow, he would go back to work. Back to salvage jobs and ordinary days. Back to a normal human life. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that things had changed. Not just for him, but for all of humanity. The galaxy was watching them now, seeing them differently than before. And that was okay, because humans had been underestimated before. They had been called weak and fragile and unimportant. They had faced impossible odds and survived. That was what they did. That was who they were. The species that never gave up. The species that looked at the impossible and said, "Somebody has to do something." Danny smiled and walked inside, leaving the stars to shine on without him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new people to help. And Danny Cole, like every human before him, would face those challenges the only way he knew how. With stubborn determination and 17 broken bones. Well, 21 technically, but who was counting?